Welcome back to our discussion, How Technology Can Rev Up Federal Talent and Skill Development, sponsored by IBM here on Federal News Network. My guest today is Emily Craig. She's a partner for talent and transformation at IBM US Federal. I'm Tom Temin. And Emily, before the break, you were talking about the change in emphasis in surveys of talent acquisition people, HR people, Chicos, that showed that, yes, those STEM specific skills are needed, but also there are a lot of soft, almost humanistic skills, poetic skills that are equally needed. I guess then the rationale being that the skills themselves don't last in terms of their utility very long because of changing technology. But what you need is people to adopt as the
Right.
skills needed change. Is that a good way to put it, or
That's
maybe
a
elaborate on
great
that?
way to that's a great way to put it. And let me add a little something though to your question. So when we go out and we collect this data, we ask, C-suite leaders, secretary, minister level folks across the board, right? So this is the point of view of the CEOs, of the chief operating officers, of the, secretaries of these agencies, the ministers of these agencies. So it's not just that HR perspective or the learning perspective. It's the people that are out there delivering the work and responsible for the work as well. But to your key question, yes. So one of the things that we've learned is, if you think about your technical skills as tools in your tool belt, the old model was half of those tools would be obsolete in the next 5 years. But the pace of change has accelerated so much that half-life, is now 2 years. Which means that we are all in this constant reskilling process. And the other thing that we've learned is the amount of time necessary to build expertise in these new, more complex technical skills, that has increased dramatically. So kind of the old standard was an average of about 3 days worth of investment. So that might be classroom training, that might be apprenticeship, a lot of different models that could take, but about 3 days worth of time to master a new skill. That's increased by 10x, right? That's now 30 days because of the complexity that goes into many of these things. So that is really a dramatic shift in the investment necessary just to keep up with the pace of change and to master these new, more complex skills.
And how does that affect the idea of hiring based on skills rather than on, say, pedigree or degree? That's been an initiative for some time that's growing. You see, it seems to be growing in the federal government, is the idea of, except if you have to be a surgeon, you need board certification and certain education. But many jobs, people can learn that skill without having had formal training in it 20 years ago when they were in college. With that rapid decay and the slowness that it takes to acquire new skills, is skills-based hiring as opposed to degree-based hiring still a viable way for agencies to think about this?
It's a great technique for agencies to think about it, and it's I think a really important move that the Trump administration made was to shift that emphasis to skills-based hiring, and I hope it's one that will continue going forward. Right. So think about the traditional education model. You walked away with a high school degree or college degree or an advanced degree, right? That was a credential that said that you had mastered something. Well, now we're taking that and breaking it down to a lower level of detail to say these are the skills that you've mastered. This is your level of mastery. But then what's also important is you're able to take that with you, right? And you're able to present and share those skills. You can either prove it through an assessment in the hiring process, or maybe it's something like a badge or a certificate that you take with you that you can present as a candidate for another job, or potentially as a candidate for promotion that shows that you've achieved that level of skill mastery moving forward.
Then it's important that the ability to acquire new skills is itself a skill that someone would want to demonstrate.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's, that constant leaning forward into what's new, what's next, how do I get deeper into the skills that I currently have, and what are the next set of skills that I need in my role to be successful, is really important. And younger workers, as they are coming into the workforce, the millennials and the Generation Z, like that's how they're born and bred, right? They are excited about that opportunity to grow, to learn what's next, and the old concept of a career ladder doesn't really apply to them. It's a lattice. that may have diagonal movement, it may have horizontal movement, it may cross multiple employers instead of maybe just one or two over the length of a career.
Yeah, so to kind of put it all together in many ways, then those that majored in poli sci or history or whatever it might have been, they can learn if they so choose. And if the agency chooses to enable them to learn it, these skills that you mentioned, say artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud programming, new programming languages for software development, 5G networking, all of those things that are in short supply, those can be learned by people that necessarily didn't have a, a computer science or electrical engineering degree.
That's right. Well, and think about, there's a significant barrier to entry to get that poli-sci degree, right? That's very expensive and it doesn't always translate to a job. So how do we make more jobs available for people who are growing those specific skill sets, to get into networking, to get into cloud computing, without that huge investment that a lot of people aren't able to make. But that point of continuing to reinvent yourself is just, it's so important, for all workers, whether it's in a federal agency or in a private sector company.
It sounds like it's also necessary for the people doing the hiring and the human resources and Chico functions to reorient their thinking away from the degree type of mode and really look at skills and take that plunge.
Well, and to think about, so we started with assessments, right? What's the role of an assessment and the increasing importance of an assessment in a hiring process? But it's also about, demonstrating that learning and growth and then being able to share that. So maybe I don't have to take the assessment because I've already earned a credential that demonstrates I have that skill in moving to the next job. But it's, how do we connect employers, whether private sector or public sector employers, with universities, with certificate or credentialing programs that put together that skills wallet that I can take with me throughout the course of my career, and present as my credentials for employment.
All right. On that note, we'll take a short break. My guest today is Emily Craig. She's a partner for talent and transformation at IBM US Federal. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This discussion is how technology can rev up federal talent and skill development, sponsored by IBM here on Federal News Network.